Welcome to the Getting Real with Hillary show, where ordinary heroes tell extraordinary stories during unique and never been heard before conversations with your host, Hillary Arno Burns. Hillary's unique listening and way of asking questions results in conversations that aren't usually talked about, so you can create the life that you really want but are afraid you can't really have. We are demonstrating the greatness in the human spirit and creating a world where we all reclaim our birthright of joy, happiness, purpose, and passion. Now, here's your host, Hillary Arno Burns. Welcome to the Getting Real with Hillary show, and today we have a very courageous and special guest. When you hear what she did, and she wrote a book about it, you are going to be inspired and want to read her book. So welcome, Heidi Beierle.
Yay. Thanks for having me,
Yay.
Hillary.
Yeah, so I was reading Heidi's book and we're not going to give it away, so we have to be careful what we say, but I'll tell you what, I couldn't put it down. I just I had to figure out where what happened. So anyway, do you want to just hold up your book so that they can go order it while they're listening to the interview? Okay, it's called Heidi Across America by Heidi Beierle, and you can get it many places. You can get it Amazon, you can get it where else? Bookstores
Yes.
all over?
Anywhere books are sold. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So you can do that. Now we're going to talk about Heidi. So Heidi, I forgot to say, she's an author, an artist, and a slow traveler. So do you want to explain what slow traveler is before we keep going? Since
Sure.
people are watching. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So slow travel builds on some of the philosophies of these other slow movements, like the slow food movement. And the idea with slow travel, it could be a lot of different things, right? So I have three main things that slow travel could be. And slow travel could be one of them, it could be two of them, it could be all three of them together. So slow travel can be this idea of micro travel or mindfulness, where you're paying attention to where you are in a particular place. It could be as easy as going outside and paying attention to how the weather feels on your skin. It could be a walk around the block or on your local trail, and you're just noticing what catches your interest while you're out there. So it minimizes distractions, right? Less technology. Um, Not
Wow.
necessarily no technology, but less technology.
So when you said it's like slow food, I never heard of that. Is that just mindfulness around food?
It's the slow food movement is the the antidote to the fast food movement, where the idea is you're having a wholesome meal cooked, you know, locally. You take the time to prepare the meal and sit and eat and digest and have conversation and other things. It's this idea that, you're not just like grabbing a bite, but you're having a whole experience around the food that you're putting in your body.
That is so, I've never heard of this. But I mean, I've heard of like being mindful instead of just shoving something in your mouth and not paying attention to it and actually sitting, paying attention. But I never, yeah, that's really cool. Okay. Are there other slow movements like involving other things?
I feel like there's another one that it's not coming to me
Okay.
immediately, but so
And did you make up the slow travel?
I,
Did you,
I'm not
or have you?
sure. I'm not
Okay.
sure that I've made it up per se, but I feel like I've been building on it. So this idea of three things we've talked about. One is not something that I've seen anywhere else. It's something that I've kind of absorbed from reading other things and also practicing it, articulating what the things are. So the second one is the idea of the journey is the destination. That
Mm.
speed is not what we're after. And what can often happen when you're traveling using climate friendly modes of travel, like walking or biking or paddling or skiing or something like that, um, you're you're not necessarily headed to a destination. Maybe you are, but the destination is kind of secondary to the experience that you have while you're getting there. And so, like, that could be a number of things, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be active modes, like riding the train or using transit or ferries or other things like that, are also constitute slow travel. Just the idea that you're moving more slowly than you might be if you were getting in a car, driving on the interstate, or hopping in a plane and not really having an experience of the landscape around you.
It's so interesting because when something is right there, like, so yesterday I was driving home with my mother. I was just telling Heidi, who's 94, has dementia. We also had my daughter in the car, which was very helpful. And I was upset because we were leaving late. And I wanted to get home. My computer had broken. I knew I needed to buy a new one. And so there were moments where I just felt like so frustrated. And then there were moments where I could be where we were and laugh. We played this game with the cars and we were counting, each color and which is that. And we called them big man trucks and little man truck, and so we started having fun. So there were moments, I think, when I was slow traveling. And then there were moments where I was back in like the rat race of I got to get home. I got to get this computer. I don't know how I'm going to, like the crazy. And I could feel the difference. It
Mhm.
was like radically different. One, I felt like I was going to kill someone, and the other, I was just enjoying my life. And I'm thinking that's what you mean by the slow travel is, and like there were moments when I said, okay, I'm going to get home an hour later. Who cares? Like no one's going to die. Nothing's going to happen. I can reschedule I was almost going to reschedule this because of the computer. And it was like, it's not the end of the world, but it felt like it. And I think when it feels like it, that's an indicator that it's not slow travel, right?
Yes, and you're also bringing up the third thing, which is live somewhere else, which is a loose term for. So let's just say you do get in your car, right? You want to go see your mother with dementia, right? So the travel is not the important part. The important part is spending time in this destination. And this also could be like airplanes are welcome too. Like you don't want to spend all your time getting to somewhere and maybe you can't even get there using something other than a plane. Um, so you hop on a plane and you go somewhere, but then the idea is that you spend time in that place and it's minimal plans, loose plans, or no plans. And the idea is that you're really sinking into the culture of where you are. You're talking to the locals, you're eating the local food, a la the slow food movement. Um, you're whatever the local culture is around you. Maybe this is where you get out and you just kind of wander around wherever it is, exploring. Um, so so that's the third idea. So in your example, yes, it is more the slow travel of I'm getting somewhere because where I want to be, this is where the destination is more important, right? So
Hmm.
I want to be at a particular destination and have the experience in this place. And yeah, so you spend time with your mother and just being in the culture, being with the people there, definitely slow travel. And
Hmm.
like gardening could be slow travel too, right? Especially because you're outside and you're paying attention to all the different things. You're not necessarily going anywhere, um, but you're really living somewhere else for a while. You're really spending the time with the community of organisms, for lack of a
Yeah.
better word, that are all around you.
Well, it's funny. I asked my brother-in-law because he has this beautiful garden, and he was out there, doing all his thing because they were having company. My sister had this big dinner, 46 people, and so they were getting all ready for 2 days while we were there. And I said, "Do you enjoy it?" And his answer was, "I enjoy the result." So I don't know how that fits in. And there were times when I was there, it wasn't my home, so they were doing their thing where I almost like couldn't be where I was because I felt like, you know what I mean? Like there was something, I was just, I was uncomfortable with something, with obviously with myself because there was no one
Mhm.
else around. It was interesting to try to, I think what I was missing was peace within myself to just be where I was because I felt like I should be somewhere else or I should be doing something, and so I think the only thing that I can learn from it is just being aware
Mhm.
that okay, I don't feel peace. How can I return to peace?
Mhm.
Because I think probably if, let's say you were at a place and you were with the locals and you thought, oh my God, I gotta get moving, or remember when you had your deadline and then all of a sudden you're stressed and
Mhm.
you're not just going along with the ride or going on the hills or riding up the hills. You're thinking about where you should be and how long it's going to take, right? Something like that.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the values of travel generally, slow travel also, is you can't actually ever escape who you are. But by taking yourself out of your familiar and normal environment, you open yourself to the possibility of being outside your comfort zone, of having an encounter with yourself, which is
Mm,
actually what happened to me in this story. So it doesn't have to be a grand epic adventure, but I
mm,
do think part of why people consider travel as transformational as they do is because we do put ourselves in these positions where we actually learn something about ourselves by
mm.
encountering things that we're unfamiliar with and seeing how we respond and react.
Yes. Good point. And so it's okay to have that discomfort. It's not wrong.
That's not
It's
wrong.
just a place to grow. Beautiful. Thank you. All right. I'll send me the invoice for this psychiatry visit and then we'll go for it. All right, great. All right. So let's take the audience back a little bit because we've been talking about the slow movement. Let's just talk about this, how the setup worked for your book, but we'll call it your trip because she did go on a trip, but you'll hear about it later, or you could tell them whenever you want. How it happened that you went on this. All right, I'll just say long bike trip. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So yes, I rode my bicycle across the country. It was in the summer of 2010. I was living in Eugene, Oregon at the time, attending classes at the University of Oregon, and I pedaled to Washington D.C. And I I went to school because of the recession. I was already feeling kind of down and lonely and stuck in my life, and things didn't feel like they were going very well, and I was underemployed, and I kept seeing these job postings for the kinds of jobs that were really attractive to me, but I didn't have a relevant degree, and
And
so
how old were you, Heidi? Just so we can place you.
in 2008, I was 33. So
Okay.
I went on this journey when I was 35.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So you and before that you had gone to school and just had jobs you didn't love,
Um,
or no?
yeah, well, how do I describe this? So, yes, I mean, I had an undergraduate and graduate degree already in English.
In
English,
English. Oh,
right?
okay.
And people
Okay.
always told me, oh, you can do anything with that, which they really kind of meant teach, but it was like, okay, well, so I had this education in English, and I did have a real job while I was finishing up my graduate degree in English. I was working at an art museum as a
Hmm.
proposal writer, which I really enjoyed. I had no idea a job like that existed. And I thought, how come nobody told me about this? It was really fun. And, I love art, and I really enjoyed learning about the art and writing about it and asking for money. And I also was pretty young and wanted to go adventure. And so I left that job to go be a climbing bum, kind of. I worked at REI selling outdoor gear.
Wow.
I moved to Colorado. I did, you know, I did a lot of mountain climbing. I was really, really into peak bagging and ice climbing. And anyway, so rock climbing.
And was that after your graduate degree? So you
Yes.
finished the degree and then you went to Colorado. Where did you start? Were you in Oregon to start?
Oh, well, I grew up in Wyoming, and
Wyoming.
I went to undergraduate school in upstate New York. And then I went to graduate school in Fort Worth, Texas. And so I went from Fort Worth to Colorado. And then
Okay.
from Colorado, I transferred my job with REI to Eugene, Oregon. So that's how I ended up in Eugene.
Wow. And where in upstate New York?
I went to Colgate University.
Okay. Okay. Cool. You grew up in Wyoming. That way you went around. So you went from Wyoming to Colgate,
Mhm.
and then to Texas. So you went around. You kind of did the whole country thing, and then over or whatever, which way to Colorado, and then back to Oregon. Okay. Cool. Wow.
Yeah. So,
Covered a lot of territory, right?
right. And,
Yeah.
it's a little hard to describe, so that, I had this professional job as a grant writer when I was in Texas, and then I shifted to retail sales, and I did some other jobs and contract work, and actually wound up working under the table for a lot of my time. Part of it was like house sitting for friends and gardening for them, and I had a very kind of itinerant work life as I was trying to figure out what I was really interested in. And Eugene also wasn't really I don't know, it didn't have a whole lot of opportunity for me in terms of job market, being a smaller town. And
How did you end up in Eugene?
I transferred my job
Oh,
with
right.
REI.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, there were
Oh,
some other things about how I ended up there. I was a
yeah.
vegan at the time, and I
Uh,
was looking for a place to live, and um, they had all these,
oh,
advertisements for rooms for, people who were vegan, which was not that normal really in um, Colorado. So I
wow.
thought, oh, my people are
Cool.
here.
Yeah.
I had no
Yeah.
idea what Eugene was like before I got there. I was like, oh, all
Yeah.
right, interesting, interesting place. It's kind of a city of artists, and
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, I really loved
So,
my time
okay.
in Eugene, and
But so you said you were underemployed. It
yeah,
was a recession. You still have the REI job, or you went back to school for something.
yeah. So
What did you do?
I was always just kind of piecing it together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was definitely looking for a change, like the hustle of trying to figure out, what's the next gardening job, what's the next house sitting job. I had a mortgage actually, and it was just like it was so much work to just always have enough money on hand to pay the mortgage. And
Mm,
um yeah, sometimes there wasn't money for anything else really.
yeah.
uh, so
So when you got to Eugene, I just have to ask.
okay,
You probably don't want to talk about it, but so when you got to Eugene, you actually bought a place, right?
not immediately, but I
But
did
eventually.
I did end up yeah, buying a place. My
Wow.
my parents helped me buy a house. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you liked it enough to do that, obviously.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good.
Yeah.
And so what year did you get there?
I arrived in Eugene in 2002.
Oh, okay. Okay. Cool. So you were still trying to figure out the age. If you were 33 in 2008, so that was 6 years before. You were still in your late 20s.
Yeah.
26. Oh, okay. So you're a baby. Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah, so you were just figuring it out. That's, my kids are like that. Okay. Yeah.
For anybody who's into the astrology, this was like going back to school was kind of the result of my Saturn return. It wasn't the actual happening of my Saturn return. Like
Sure.
nothing was happening during my Saturn return, which was part of what was frustrating me so badly. I was like, why can't I get anything to happen? Um,
Okay, and then you went back to school for you. So when you went, okay, question. Did you know you didn't want to be a teacher? Like, why did you get the graduate degree in English, or was that just the thing to do? Or people said it was a good idea or something. And it's okay when we're in our 20s, but
I think so here's my I didn't know how to change my life necessarily when I was a young person. What I
mm,
did know was that school was one avenue to do that. So when I graduated from high school, I wanted to get the heck out of town. And I used going to college as an opportunity to do that, which, I wanted to see more of the world and
yeah.
experience different cultures and environments. And it was really the perfect thing for me to do what I did. And and so when I had a gap year between
Mm,
graduating undergrad and going to grad school, and that was, I was like, well, I don't know what to do here. I don't
mm,
want to stay in Wyoming, and so I applied to graduate school because that was how I knew how
to do
how to
it.
get out
Yeah.
of town.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah.
So yeah,
So you went to Texas. Okay,
yeah,
and
and then
then
I learned some other ways of getting out of town at that point.
okay. Would you like to talk about them or no?
Well, I just, I met some other people who, were maybe not on the education track,
Mhm.
who were having lives, and not to say that they were unstuck. They just had a different way of being in the world that was interesting to me. And I met people. I met somebody from Washington State, and I traveled to visit him, and he also had connection to Portland, Oregon, and so I had gone traveling, and then I had also gotten into mountain climbing. I was
Mm,
I was into mountain climbing before I even went to college, but hadn't really done it on my own. And when I was in Texas, I started working at REI and met people interested in that kind of thing. And so I started to just really enjoy the fact that I had this freedom and liberty to go out and adventure and experience the world. And how my pursuit of climbing then was this avenue for me to see different parts of the country and different parts of the world. And
wow,
yeah.
it's so cool. So okay, so from Fort Worth to Colorado, that's where you worked for REI and you climbed, right? And then you went to Eugene and was a vegan and bought your house, and there you were.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I originally started working at REI in Dallas, and I
okay,
transferred my job in Dallas to Colorado, transfer
okay,
that job in Colorado to Oregon.
okay.
That was the through line. Most people showed up in Eugene. I often joked that I showed up in Eugene because my VW bus broke down, because that's how most people end up in Eugene.
Yeah,
But I actually had a job, which was never the way anybody showed up in Eugene with a job.
that's funny. So then, okay, so when you went back to school, I keep forgetting, what did you go back to study?
I went to study community and regional planning. So I,
Okay,
I I was thinking of art therapy. And I was thinking, oh, I'll go to Naropa Institute in Boulder, Colorado. And then I thought, well, that's an expensive city. I don't have any money. Why would I maroon myself there? And so I looked at what programs were available at the University of Oregon. At, at the time, I also had gotten involved in my neighborhood association. I was a city planning commissioner, and I had also been working on a contract basis with some nonprofit arts organizations that were looking at arts as a way to revitalize the downtown area. And
mm,
so there was this interest to me, the kind of intersection of art with planning. And I was finding these jobs that were for active transportation planners, bicycle pedestrian planners, and they all required a relevant degree, right? So English was not relevant, even though I feel like that is absolutely a relevant
Yes,
degree
you're
for
right.
a
Yeah.
planning type of position. But so I was like, I have a graduate degree, but I am not qualified for these jobs, even though I'm doing this work basically.
Hmm.
And I had considered landscape architecture, but that was a
Hmm.
4-year program. Planning was 2, and I didn't need to resubmit SATs or I don't know, whatever it was. It was like an easy thing. I was like, okay, what's the least amount of time I have to go back, and what is kind of in my interest area?
Yeah.
What qualifies as a relevant degree for what I think I want to do?
So, okay. So you went how long before your bike trip?
Well, so I started in the fall of 2009, back to
Okay.
school, and
Okay.
it was a very jarring experience for me. I had a social life, right? I had been in Eugene and encountered all these people and made all these friends. And when school started, it was like deadline, deadline, deadline. Got to read all this stuff, churn through it, right? And I was like, my friends, every once in a while I would hang out with them, but I was like, oh my gosh, this managing my social life on top of all this schoolwork is not working very well. I was like going to bed at 7 o'clock at night and getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to just try and, you know, get my work done,
Mm.
in the way I could do it. It was very, so like my social life got cut off. I was having issues with my hip. I
Mm.
just like so much sitting. I was just like going in this downward spiral, and I was like, oh my gosh, this was the wrong thing to do. Like this school thing isn't working. And all
Mm.
I wanted to do was ride my bike. I was like, I love riding my bike. I feel so happy when I'm out there, just, in nature and pedaling around and being in my skin. Like that would it was like that would solve all my problems. And so in December, it was the very beginning of December, it was during final presentations, and I got this email from my mom that was an announcement about the Preserving the Historic Road Conference, which was in Washington, D.C. in September of 2010. So December 2009, September of 2010. And I have an uncle who lives in Washington, D.C. And so my mom's message was, hey, here's this conference. Let's go to this conference and hang out with the uncle, and that'd be dandy. And I was like, yeah, I was actually interested in transportation and preservation, which was why she sent it. Uh,
Hmm.
but I was like, that doesn't actually sound like something that would fill me up. It's not like the thing that's calling for me to do. But then I was like, but it's in September, and I was like, oh, the fall term starts at the end of September. I was like, spring is done in June. That's like, I don't know, could I ride to Washington, D.C. over the summer? And so I wrote this really flip response. It was like this really quick calculation. I was like, I don't know if it's possible, but why not? So I was like, sure, I'll ride out there and meet you. And I sent the email, and then I was like, wow, that's a great idea. I should do that. I had no
Well, where was
aspirations.
your mom? Where was your mom coming from?
She's also in Oregon,
Oh,
so
okay.
not in the same town, but nearby. Like,
She was gonna fly. Yeah.
yeah. So
Okay, good.
so
Wow.
so then I was like, okay, what a good idea. I gotta get myself a spot to speak at this conference, which I did. I gotta figure, and like I'll make this my research project. I'll make it the basis of my research for my program, and just
And how did you get a spot to speak? You just said, "Hey, I want to speak." Like, how did that happen?
I'm creative and crafty.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing. That I'm
No.
impressed.
Well,
But I want to know how you did it. Yeah.
the conference had a they had a topic area on historic road tourism. And so
Okay.
part of how I ended up creating the project I did had to do with the conference. I was like,
Oh, okay.
okay,
Yeah.
so if this is my destination and there's an opportunity to talk about tourism on historic roads, like how do I make
Mm.
those connections? I'm going to be on a bike. And so then it was like, okay, it's about bike tourism. And at first I thought it was going to be kind of an environmental climate focused
Mm.
research project. But then I had people saying, long distance bike travel isn't going to make a dent in carbon because not enough people can
Yeah.
do that. So then I shifted my focus to the economics of it. Like, does it make economic sense for rural communities to support bicycle
Mm.
tourism, and rural communities and historic roads go together too. So this was one of the
Mm.
things that I was learning about transportation and preservation. So that's how I came up with the idea, was this idea that bicycle tourism could support rural economic development. So it wasn't necessarily about the bicyclist per se, but it was really more about small community development.
And not necessarily about the historic roads, or
Well,
that fit in.
I mean, it's
It's
interesting how the
all
historic
together.
roads fit in. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of historic roads are scenic byways, and so bicycle touring routes tend to follow these low traffic scenic roads because it's a nice
Hmm.
experience. When roads were originally built, they were built as scenic driving experiences. They weren't interested in just going as fast as they could. So when the interstate system came in, that really changed the scope of how people travel and how communities
Oh.
benefited or didn't benefit. And so off of the interstates on these slow traveled routes is the evidence of the past transportation system where these communities had, facilities for travelers
Mm.
like motels and hotels, and even before vehicles, the towns are spaced about 25 miles apart because that's as far as a horse can travel in one day. And and so it was actually a really fascinating thing to experience. Like, this, traveling in the rural countryside is really pretty comfortable as a
Mm.
cyclist. Like, there's hardly anybody on these roads. The towns are spaced at convenient intervals where I don't have to go too far without resources or services.
Hmm. Hmm.
And um, and
Interesting.
and they travel through really beautiful countryside. So there's there's more about the rural roads too. I think there's really some great opportunities for bicycling to provide some kind of benefit for historic areas because there's less vibration, less
Mm.
road space needed to accommodate bicycles. So in historic communities, it's, I don't know. And inviting bicyclists in is actually one way to help a community protect its historic resources.
Interesting.
And
Wow,
another,
this is so cool. All right, we'll
okay,
hold that thought. Can you remember what you were going to say? Because we're going to go to our
okay.
commercial break, and then we're going to come back and hear the rest. This is so, yeah, some of that I missed while reading, but it really provides a great, yeah. Anyway, okay. All right, we'll come back. We'll come
Okay.
back. Okay.
Has social emotional learning become just one more thing on your teachers' plates? Do teachers and students both find it boring and ineffective? Then bring Kikori to your school. Kikori transforms classrooms through experiential SEL activities that help students play, reflect, connect, and grow. Even better, students say it's more fun than recess. Schedule a no-obligation conversation at kikoriapp.com/bringkikori. KIKORI.
Do you ever feel like you can't say what you really want to say? or that you're stuck or in a holding pattern in your relationships, career, personal life, or finances? Are there things you want in life that you've given up on? Are you resigned that this is as good as it's going to get? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then Hillary Burns, host of the Getting Real with Hillary show, has the solution you need. Hillary is a published author of 3 books and has a program called the Getting Real process. This process frees you from what is holding you back, allowing you to create a life you love. Don't believe it? It is hard to believe that it could work, isn't it? The proof is that hundreds of Hillary's clients have used the Getting Real process and are now free to create whatever they want in relationships, career, finances, enjoying life, or just loving themselves more. So go to realtalkwithhillary.com and order Hillary's book, Real Talk, and set up a conversation.
And thank you as always to our sponsor, KakoriApp.com. If you would like to bring experiential, social emotional learning to your schools, to your teams, to your businesses, go to KakoriApp.com. It's a fabulous product, and it really does. If you do their activities, you will feel connected, you will feel social, and you will start loving your life more. So that's KakoriApp.com. Go to the website and schedule a consultation. And as always, if you don't feel comfortable speaking up, if something's bothering you, you can't put your finger on it, but you want to have a non-judgmental ear, go to Hillary. You can email me at hillary@gettingrealwithhillary.com. We can have a conversation and get you back into loving your life again, because it really does work. I use this technique all the time, and it always helps me. So welcome back, Heidi Beierle. Am I saying it right?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right. So you decide all these different things. The historic roads. We have tourism, bike tourism. You're going to speak at the conference, right? Am I missing
Mhm.
part of it? No, I can't even read my own notes. And the scenic roads and all that. But I never knew that about that the way that people used to drive was the scenic routes. And then when they put in the highways, that's just for speed. It's so interesting, right? I just never thought about it because I probably don't go, I'm in the Northeast. I probably haven't really driven out there that much. So is that how so you had this thought before I give it away. You decided to do this. That's how you planned your trip to go through these historic places, right? And the scenic roads. Is that right?
Well, I'd like to think it was intentional like that, but I had more like this idea. Like I'm studying bicycle tourism and its benefit to rural communities, and I had an idea that there was also a connection, because the research that I did before I left is that there was a good roads movement established early turn of the century ish,
Mm.
19th, early 20th century, I guess, to improve the quality of roads. And it was actually initiated by bicyclists. Because the bicyclists were out touring before the automobile became popular. Bicycles were wildly popular. And so
Are you talking about the 1900s?
yeah.
Like early 1900?
Hmm.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
Wow. So bicycles, is that when they had the big ones? When you see the picture of the big
Right.
wheel?
Right.
Or did
They
they
called
have?
them the ordinary or the penny farthing. Yeah. So that was part of it. The bicycle evolved fairly quickly,
Mhm.
over like I'm a little rusty on my dates, but like a 20, 30 year period. So once what they called the safety bicycle at that time looks most closely like what we associate with a
Okay.
bicycle today. When that bicycle was invented, it became accessible for all kinds of people. to ride. It didn't require this flying leap to get on the bicycle, basically. Um,
Mm.
and so that really revolutionized how much people could ride around, and bicycles were affordable and automobiles were not. And so people were, they would go joyriding basically out, out in the countryside and stay over at hotels and inns and other things like that. And the quality of the roads was really terrible. They would be very muddy, or they were paved with logs, which were really bumpy, or cobbles, or they just, like, there wasn't great
Mm.
pavement technique yet, and macadam roads were still early in development. So the bicyclists started advocating for improved roads to improve the experience of getting out, and they used this economic argument,
To the
like,
government?
yeah, as
Yeah.
part of their advocacy efforts and lobbying efforts. So, like,
Wow.
if it's easier for us to get out, it's easier for us to spend money in these places. So,
Interesting. Right?
yeah. And
Who
then
would have thought of
another,
that, right? Like, I take roads for granted. They're paved or they're not, right? But it's so interesting, right? To think that, well, we didn't have cars then, so what did they have? Well, I
right.
guess the horses. We had the horses.
Uh-huh. And then early cars also
Hmm.
were not very strong, robust, right? So, there, in 1922, the first scenic highway in America was designed in Oregon along the Columbia River. And that opened in 1926. And one of the things about the Columbia River Gorge, excuse me, is that it's really cliffy, and the vehicles needed a much shallower grade
Mm.
than, like, to get up it. Otherwise, what are you going to do? Get out of your car and push it up these steep hills. So they developed an engineering style and technique that kept the road grades below 5% so that the vehicles could make it up the steeper sections. And in order to do that, they put a lot of loops basically
Oh my God.
into the system to get the length that they needed to minimize the grade. And this was good also for railroads and other things like that. But as a bicyclist, it is so nice to ride on a historic road because it's not so steep, right? If the grade is
Is that
5%.
why there's this, like, I don't know if you call them switchbacks, but
Mhm,
I never thought of like why they would do that, but that's for the grade. You have to.
mhm, mhm.
You have a side of a mountain, you have to go back and forth, right?
Right.
Interesting.
And the interstate
Oh,
system, was designed
oh,
actually so that you could land an airplane on it. So it couldn't, the freeways, that's part of why they were so wide and so straight. So you could land an airplane on it. They were developed as like a wartime something or other,
wow. Ooh,
emergency. So, yeah.
that is wild. That's really wild. I guess that's what you studied, right? That's why you know all this.
Yeah. Sorry to geek out about that.
No, no, no. I think it's interesting because it's like I don't think about this stuff. So no, it's really cool. Obviously, you were a good student because you learned all this. But all right, so we have like 13 minutes, or yeah, we have like 10 minutes before we have to wrap up. So let's talk about. So you obviously learned this. You were going to Washington to speak. You decided to ride your bike from Oregon to Washington. I loved hearing about it because I mean, just like sleeping outside with bugs is enough to make me not want to do it. Like, how, you know, did you have your route planned? Did you know where you were going at all times, or did you kind of wing it?
I I I knew how I was going. So
Okay.
there's an organization based in Missoula, Montana called Adventure Cycling Association,
Okay.
and they were established in 1976. They put together the route that I rode. They called it Bike Centennial at the time, but it's the Transamerica Bicycle Trail, and they inaugurated this route in 1976 as a way to celebrate the US bicentennial. And so the route extends from Yorktown, Virginia to Florence, Oregon, or Astoria, Oregon. So it
Okay.
goes coast to coast. And one of the nice things that the organization does as part of their route planning is they have already mapped out the lower traffic roads and connected them. And then on these maps, they have indicated the towns, the populations, and the kinds of services that you can get in them. And then the maps are in like 25-mile segments. So they make it really easy to plan out a route. Because I was
Oh,
finishing school, I didn't have time to figure out how the heck I was going to go anywhere. So I
yeah.
actually established a partnership with Adventure Cycling Association to hand out window decals to the businesses along the route. So that gave me an opportunity to talk to the businesses about the benefit of bicyclists. I was kind of like a bike tourist
Oh,
ambassador, if you will, when I was out there. And in exchange, they gave me a jersey that was the US bicycle route system, and they gave me these maps so that I could navigate my way across the country. So it was planned out in that respect,
yeah.
but on a
Okay.
daily basis, I was kind of winging it in terms of where I was going to stay.
Wow. So is that why you saw so many? It seems like you saw so many cyclists and some of the same over and over because they were following the same route.
That's correct.
That's so cool. Yeah, see, I didn't I, I didn't get all that. I was, it's interesting what you focus on. Like I focus on the story, on the people, on the food, where's she gonna eat, is she going to the bathroom, like all that
Uh-huh.
kind of stuff and not like I remember the decals, but I didn't really get why. So okay, that's cool. Right. So you I know you did make friends with some of the people and you had some amazing adventures, which you'll have to
Did.
read the book to find out what they are. Um, Interesting. Okay. And now, can I just ask, were you, well, I know you were, but like terrified? Like there would be times when I was reading it that I was like, "Ah!" Like were you scared at certain points?
I definitely was scared at certain points. Two two moments come to me.
Yeah.
So the the first moment, this was about a little more than a week into the journey, and I was in Idaho, and I'd stopped in this very tiny town, and I was headed from a bar in the town where I had dinner to the RV park that was a little bit outside of town where
Mm.
I was going to camp for the night. And when I was riding on that road, there was no cars on it. It was totally empty, and somebody was coming up from behind me, just one vehicle. I was pull over. I didn't stop, but I'm pedaling as far to the edge of the road as I could, and the road dropped off rather precipitously on the side. And I look behind me, the car's coming. I look behind me, the car's coming, and then I noticed that this pickup truck starts to like veer into me as it's passing. So that terrified me. Actually, I was like, there's no reason. I mean, apart from the fact that what maybe they dropped their phone or something and they were
Yeah.
looking for it, but there's no reason for this person to be swerving into me. It felt very, very aggressive. I felt very vulnerable. I was totally freaked out because there was nowhere I could go. It's like I could fall off the road or I could get hit on the road.
Mm.
So that was a moment certainly where I was very rattled, and it
Did you ever see that person again? I forget.
no,
Did they?
I did
No,
not.
you didn't.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So
So you never knew
there
why.
were other drivers can be very erratic. I mean,
Mm.
sometimes I was like, yeah, I wasn't so worried about the bears and the cougars. Yeah, I saw warning signs all over the place about bears and cougars, but yeah, drivers could be very erratic. I you know, there's a difference between a close call and an actual collision. And I never had a collision with anybody, but there were some things that it's just part of the experience of being a bicyclist on the road is having kind of close calls. But that was one that really scared me. And then I did have some wildlife interactions that terrified me. One was, so, I'd seen all these signs about how to protect yourself from bear and cougar attack. And I ended up in this place where there was a lot of haying activity going, but it's beautiful
A lot of
field,
what activity?
haying. They
Oh,
were
hay.
making hay.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's a beautiful meadow, mountains in the distance, wildflowers. And I had stopped to take a picture. And I was like, like having these little pinches on my backside. And I looked down and I'm like covered in mosquitoes, absolutely covered in mosquitoes. So they flood the fields for the hay, and it's like
Oh,
mosquitoes everywhere. And so I was totally freaked out in this. And there's like no way to get away from the
uh,
mosquitoes except to like pedal as fast as I possibly could.
yeah.
And then a
Did they
little
get off of you eventually?
eventually, I mean, I had to kind of brush them off. I had to keep moving. And so
Were you all bitten up?
I was,
Oh,
yes. I
oh,
was usually buttoned up on my backside. It was
oh
it was
God.
very uncomfortable. And so I did have a tarp shelter. I didn't have a tent, but I had this tarp shelter, so it wasn't enclosed or anything. And I had been planning that night to camp, but I
Mm,
was like, "There's no way in hell that I'm camping out in this place." Get me somewhere with a room that has screens on the windows. And
yeah.
so I had to I had to ride further than I was planning to go to get to this, an indoor lodging place. And on my way there, I saw something like fall out of the sky. And I was not sure what it was. I was like, was that just like some weird thing on
Yeah.
my sunglasses? Like, what was that? And and then a giant hawk
Mm,
raptor like flew at my head. And I was, anyway, you read about this in the book.
yeah.
But I had this encounter with a raptor, and there was nothing anywhere that gave me any, like, no PSA about how to deal with the fact that a bird the size of
You
half your
really went
body is like
like,
flying at your
oh,
head.
oof,
So
wow.
those were times I was terrified.
Yeah. Wow. But you kept going. I mean, that's amazing. You just kept going.
Kept
So
going.
amazing. Woo. Ugh. Okay. So we're gonna start wrapping up. Show them your book again. We would love for you to support Heidi and her. Now you're still um for the scenic roads and all that and bicycling tourism and stuff like that. Are you still working with that? Is it going to support that, or just, I know it's a great story. It's amazing what she went through, but what would you hope to accomplish with the book? And I guess we are wrapping up now. Like 5 years from now, what would be your dream that would happen from the interview and from the book? What would be your dream?
Well, my hope for readers is just this acknowledgement that if you are feeling stuck in your life, that it is possible to get unstuck. And this is my story of how I did it. And I think it's possible for other people to take principles from this. But mostly I want people to take hope from it and
Mm,
kind of make the journey your own. That there are other things out there. If you feel the tug, that there's something different for you in your life, that listen to that call, feel that tug, and um, respond to it. And there were several people that I encountered along the ride who were feeling stuck in their lives. And I talked to them. And I think that that's it was a powerful moment for me to interact with them and think about, oh, here I am out transforming my life. Maybe they could take some inspiration from me while I was out there doing it. And I feel like those people's experiences are there for readers also. So in terms of historic roads, I feel like what I studied, what I learned, and the work that I did after this has really morphed into this idea of slow travel, where I'm really advocating now for people to take these 3 principles of slow travel and again make it their own. And like we were talking about at the beginning, it's I feel like these 3 principles make slow travel accessible to anybody, no matter their ability or orientation or there's whatever the barriers are to other kinds of travel. I feel like there's something you can find in slow travel that you can take and embrace. Like I said, like the simplest thing is just go outside and pay attention to the weather. And part of the change and transformation that slow travel can affect in people's lives is by, making an incremental change that you repeat over and over, that then leads to a greater transformation over time. So, it may not seem like much, but, regularly practicing being in contact with, the greater world around you, I feel like is one of the ways that I have come to feel less alone in the world, that I realize I'm part of the fabric of life and I'm not actually alone. And part of being out on my bike and encountering all these strangers and being cared for in ways I was not expecting really helped me come to see that even though I felt alone, I was not actually alone. Like it kind of took the glasses off, or removed the varnish from how I was seeing the world, instead of seeing it as I am alone to I am in community with other people, with other beings. And that was very, I don't know. It was just, it was so important for me to understand and recognize that, that I'm a part of everything. In the same way that, encountering roadkill on a regular basis reminded me that I could be roadkill at any moment. And how am I showing up in this moment in my life? Like I felt like, am I waiting for something to happen? Am I going to wait too long? And if I'm waiting, why am I waiting? Why am I not moving toward it? So that's where I feel like making an incremental change toward the thing that you want helps.
Yeah. Wow. That's so great. Thank you so much, Heidi. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for doing what you're doing for slow travel. It's such an interesting topic, and the scenic byways and all of that. So thank you for bringing that to people's attention. And thank you for being courageous and just doing what you did and conquering all of it. And again, read Heidi's book. Can you just hold it up one more time? Yes. Heidi Across America. It's such a cool book. If you have any interest in cycling, historic roads, any of that stuff, just get it. It's so cool. So thank you again. And thanks for being here. And we'll see you all next week.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you for watching this episode. I started getting real with Hillary when I discovered that I was a people-pleasing, pleasant phony and wanted to be more of my real self. We can grow together if you will like the show, subscribe to my channel, and share this episode with your friends and family so that we can have a world that's more real.